Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Allen and Heath SQ Series Deep Dive webinar. This webinar is a part of our 2020 Virtual Digital Console Expo, and in fact, this is the final event of our expo this year. So thanks to everyone who has been tuning in throughout all these events. Thanks to all of our manufacturer partners, without whom we obviously would not be able to do this. So just want to let you know that if you have missed any of the previous content throughout the expo this week, we have recorded all of the main session presentations. We've recorded all of these deep dive sessions. We're recording this one as well. I believe the main sessions are already all uploaded and available for viewing on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and review those. And we're working on getting those deep dive sessions up as well. Those will be trickling out over the next couple of days. So if you are joining us and you're not familiar with our company, or if maybe you're watching this recording on YouTube in the future, let me tell you a little bit about TC Furlong Inc. We are a live sound company based outside of Chicago, Illinois, in the Lake Forest area. We've been in business for nearly 50 years now. And we are a company that focuses on pretty much everything within the live sound world. We do equipment sales, equipment rentals, live event production, and a host of services, including repairs, sound system design and tuning, RF coordination, and a whole lot more. So that's a little bit about us. But on to the content of our webinar tonight, which is the Allen and Heath SQ series. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So as we're going through our presentation here, please don't be shy. Please type all your questions into the Q&A portion in the Zoom platform, and we'll try to get to those live as we go along. The more questions you ask to help steer the conversation, the better it'll be. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters for this evening. Joining us are Pat McConnell with Allen and Heath USA and Shawn McLoughlin with AudioBiz. How are you guys doing this evening?
Really well, thank you, Aaron.
Doing good.
All right, guys, I'll let you take it away.
All right. So thanks to the TC team again. This has been a fabulous week. We've all had a blast on behalf of all the manufacturers involved. We're always in competition, but it's usually pretty friendly competition because all of us have audio in our hearts. I'm happy to have had a fabulous partner for this, the big guy here, Redbeard, the local legend, and the TC team just putting on a fabulous event. So thanks for signing on for our deep dive for the SQ series this evening. Shawn, you going to start us with a joke?
Yes. What do you call a sound guy with a fresh roll of gaff tape?
I don't know what.
A thief. Hopefully all you guys will appreciate that.
All right. You can tell things will get a little punchy tonight just because it's the last hour of the party. So what we'll do is we'll dive in for SQ. What I want to do is give you an overview of the technology, the product. We've got good camera shots. We've got an SQ6 hooked up. I've got some of the ME personal mixers connected to that so that you can see how that works and just launch into stuff. I would really love this to be as interactive as possible so that if you've tuned in for this, you're feel free to totally just lurk and I'll talk at you for a while, show you a few things. But if you do have something that's just burning a hole, like you got to get this answered right away, just shoot it over to us in the text and we'd like to make this as interactive as possible.
Yeah, just throw those questions out in the Q&A forum and I'll be stepping out of the shot here, but I will pass those on to Pat here so we can get everything answered for you guys. So thanks again for joining us.
Absolutely.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so here we go. If we talk a little about SQ in our series, I don't know if all of you have tuned into our previous presentations, but the technology, SQ's been in the market for a couple of years now for us. It is a relatively new development in the technology that Allen and Heath uses. And Shawn, can I just throw a couple slides up for the grins of it if you could bring that up for me. Allen and Heath has implemented Fpga technology in all of our new mixers in the D-Live, the Avantis, and in the SQ. So the SQ that we have, all three models, are powered by what we call our XCVI core, right? This isn't the same processor that we have in the D-Live, but it is a downsized version of it because we don't need to do quite everything that is. It's a little smaller. But this gives us the advantages over all of the other manufacturers that are still using DSP technology. And FPGA is a computer core. and it allows us the engine that's just incredible math horsepower that gives us industry-leading ultra-low latency. We're talking sub-millisecond for everything that we do, and it doesn't change. It's very consistent. It gives us variable bit depth. Whoops. Whoa. Yeah, it's Thursday. Variable bit depth. It's a 24-bit signal basically coming in on 2496 preamps. So it's 96 kilohertz sampling rate for everything within the console and on our I/O boxes, which we'll talk a little bit about, and gives us something that we reference as mixed coherency. Now that's something that we find that's unique to us in our approach to how our digital consoles work. And what that means is you can assign things to an input, to an aux, through other buses if you want to have a DCA or a group, and then assign those groups to other locations or to the main output bus. And there's no additional latency. There's no phase incoherency that occurs. It works like old analog consoles used to, and that's when everything moved at the speed of electrons. It all came out, it hit the output bus at the same time, and it maintained the phase relationship. This makes an incredible difference in what the desk sounds like. And what I like to say about the SQ series, you may have heard this before from me, is that this 2496 console sounds like it's a 6-figure console, but it's a 4-figure price point, right? And we have 3 different offerings in the SQ series, just to give you a quick pick shot of it, if you could. The SQ5 was our first entry. This one has 16 faders, 16 local I/O, 12 local outputs, and this one is rack mountable. You have to purchase a set of ears for it. But if you wanted something that's portable, now it is a 48 input mixable console, right? Okay, so we'll talk about that. That can be done with additional remote I/O. But the engine in all 3 of the desks that I'll show you is exactly the same. So the SQ XCVI core is in each desk, and it lives inherently inside of the desk. And that is the engine that will allow you 48 mixable inputs with a left-right output and 12 additional mono or stereo mixes, plus matrices and a bunch of extra stuff. We'll talk a little more about that. The SQ6 is the next step up, and that's actually a 24 fader version of the same console. It has more local I/O. It has 24 local I/O, local inputs, excuse me, a little bit more expanded output, and then it has 14 local XLR outputs. And then the last one, which is the SQ7, is the 32 fader version of the SQ, and that's the big brother of the 3. The engine is identical once again, and if you notice on the SQ6 and on the SQ7, we increased just a couple other features in that we had a little more real estate, and we added some, in addition to the soft control functions that are on all 3 desks, we added some programmable rotaries and some more soft control buttons, and we'll talk about what some of that technology does as we go. So Shawn, if you can jump back, and I'll talk a little bit more about the tech of what we had put this together for. The idea was to take this and put it in a workhorse little desk that's transportable. It's caseable. You can get, major manufacturers are making road cases for this that's easy and transportable. It's lightweight, but it is in fact made out of aluminum and steel. We don't make anything out of blow molded plastic, right? So if we look at some of the features that are built into it as far as numbers, you don't have to put anything up for this, Shawn, if you don't want to, but just to kind of give you guys this, I talked about 48 inputs. There's 36 total bus outputs, but the important part is the 12 mixes. There's 3 stereo matrices. This was originally just when it was released stereo only, but we had so many calls from the field to say, hey, I need mono and stereo matrices. We built it in, and you have 3 matrices, and you can make those either selectable stereo or mono. Same thing with the stereo mixes. They could be stereo or mono mixes. You can choose. You have a total of 12. So programmability that the user can define, right? There's I/O ports there is an I/O port on the back of the desk. There's one singular port. That one is, but at the price point, it's astounding. That's how we play well with others, and that's a 64 input by 64 output port. And then we've also got a built-in USB interface on the back of the desk. That one's a USB-B with 32 ins and 32 outs. So if you want to use that with a DAW control setup, or if you want to have that as an interface for streaming, it works fabulously. And then, as we said before, the sub-millisecond latency that we've got in it. So cool stuff as it goes. And if we talk a little bit about some of that connectivity and those technologies, we said how many inputs and how many gazintas and gazoutas the desk have, but some of the thing that we do, the other thing that we do is we try to play well with others, right? So the idea is I mentioned that we've got a slot port on the back. So on the back, we can pop in a card, and we have a number of cards available. The example that I use here is Dante, because everybody seems to like to fly the Dante flag. Now, if you don't need Dante, we don't build the additional cost into the console, but for hundreds of dollars, not thousands, you can add a 64 input by 64 output, 2496 Dante card. Okay, so that's a big jump up from the rest of the industry. Even our Dante processing is a step ahead of some of our competitors, right? And that is 2496. If you had something like, hey, wait a minute, Pat, I got a 2448 Lake processor or something that I have to go in at that rate via Dante or whoever's processor, right? We can switch that card down in Dante controllers, so you can have it be part of a legacy system, and you're still future ready if you decide that you wish to do it. It converts it at the card I/O rather than the entire desk. The desk always operates 2496 because we want the availability of all of that math and the headroom and the detail that that provides before we have to convert down in a mix if that's what you choose to do. So that little card slot gives us a lot of capability. In addition to that, on the back of the desk, we've got what we call an S-Link port, okay? And our S-Link is our proprietary technology. So if we talk about all the desks that I've talked about from Allen and Heath, they'll use our proprietary connections, and those are what we call now a GigaAce connection. And our GigaAce port is our proprietary audio over Ethernet connection. Now, this isn't labeled GigaAce because it's even a little bit of a step forward from that. GigaAce is our current technology, and that's all 2496. Our first foray into that 10 years ago, or better now, was actually the ACE protocol, okay? So that one was 2448. The S-Link will allow you to connect whatever you might have for legacy product into an SQ, or you can use what's new product with it. We want to just make sure that we work with everything. And we have what we call our everything I/O ecosystem, right? So if we talk about that, like what do we have for boxes for gazintas and gazoutas separate from the console? Because remember, the SQ, while it's inherent and it's a functional console on its own with local I/O, the real, sort of secret surprise is that you can build this system and it can be part of a larger network, either with our desks, other stuff and components that you're working with, and you can also use the advantages of having remote I/O, right? So I put together just a couple of slides to throw at you what we've got on the website. You can check this out on your own. But SQ will work with everything that we currently manufacture and a bunch of our legacy product. So our current 2496 capable boxes, the most common is the DX168. It's 16 ins and 8 outs, right? And we make a modular version, a DX32, that you can decide what you want to configure it as from the D-Live systems, and that will also work with the SQ. We have a wall-mounted box if you're doing installation or if you're in an application where you know what, I'm going to run this thing at a theater, I wish I could just pop this in the back of the stage. Great, we've got a DX164, 16 ins and 4 outs. And there's a lot of features in that. We won't go into everything about it. And if you look at the lower left-hand side of that, you'll see what looks like the end shot of one of these boxes, the DX168 box. That one's actually called a DT168. So the DT is Dante connectivity. It's Dante specific to connect to 16 of our 2496 preamps. You can remote control the preamps with our system. The DT boxes that we have, if you're specific, are Dante only, and you do need the Dante card installed in the SQ to marry along with that. And if we talk about that just a little bit, we were the first to develop that 2496 remote preamp technology with Audinate. We've been in the market with that for over a year now, and we've actually put the newest chipset from Audinate, and they're the company that owns Dante's technology, right? They licensed it, we developed it with them, and we were the first to step into the market with that. So while you can connect Dante at line level to anybody's devices, the remote preamp part of it has to work exclusively with our desks and our boxes, so you're not caught by surprise. But it's easy. Little Dante card into the SQ, whatever you want for Dante boxes, and you're good to go. So let's talk about this. For bad movie references for 500, Shawn, I'm going to choose Ghostbusters tonight, okay?
Okay.
So think of it as though, like, hey, what can I connect to that S-Link port? Well, you can connect any, before I can do that, I have one more thing that I have to hit on a slide to show everybody, right? I get talking so fast I forget. I've got an SQ series connection for our legacy boxes. I mentioned it, but just to cover it for you, the AR2412, the AR84, and the AB168, which were all boxes that worked with our GLD series and our Q series, which is still current, those are 2448. Those two, because of the S-Link, can plug right into an SQ box. Okay, thanks for that, buddy. I appreciate it. So now, back to Ghostbusters. People say, okay, how can I connect this stuff to an S-Link port? You can connect one flavor or one technology to an S-Link port. So if you're using 2496 preamps, you can hook up multiples. We have a little switch and the capability of doing that as a network protocol, but it all needs to remain 2496. If you want to hook up 2448 technology, it all needs to be all on that same line, right? It can be series. We can have a switch input that we have that gives you that capability that we call a hub. But that technology has to remain the same. You can't put the 2496 and a 2448 connected together. Now, how do we do both of those into the same system? Really easy. We've got that little card slot, and for a couple $100, you can pop a second S-Link port in, and you can hook up, hey, I want to hook up a bunch of DX168 boxes or a DX168 and a GX4816 and whatever else I want. I could do that on my single S-Link for 2496, and then if I want other stuff that would be 2448, I can pop it in the card. Or if, as we mentioned before, I want to have Dante capability, then I pop a Dante card in, and the Dante connections all connect into the Dante card to the DT boxes or other Dante connections in your network. So is that pretty clear? Did I miss anything?
That is pretty clear. We did get a couple questions
all right,
in
let's
from
have
connectivity.
Thank you.
First off, from our friend Douglas.
All right.
He was
Douglas.
wondering if there is any plans for like a faderless version, like an SQ pack similar to our Q pack.
Douglas, you always ask me the hard questions. I'll give you the official answer right now, and that is I don't have anything on the immediate horizon. But as Douglas well knows, and I think most of you on the webinar know, Alan and Heath's motto from our managing director on down is, look, we don't design products, our customers design products. So just listen, right? So I would just want you to know that I'm definitely listening. Douglas, thank you for the question. And it's not the first time I've heard it. The most vocal place that you are invited to participate is in any of our user forums, right? So you can jump on to the Alan and Heath website and you can join that if you wish to be official about it. If you just want to be casual, you can jump into our Facebook forums and there's user groups for SQ and for Avantis and DLive and any of those things. If you want to, you can tag up anything that you've got there. What's cool about it is it's a really helpful community. I'm sure you guys are involved in most of this already. But those are read and monitored and watched very closely by all of our teams, both in the UK and the US. So while it may look like they're just lurking, we have a tendency to have other folks just kind of take care of the trolls rather than us, get all defensive. We just like to learn and observe. So great question. Thank you, Douglas.
And our second question was actually from Brian.
All right.
From yesterday. He's on this one also. He's like, can you discuss gain sharing between multiple consoles?
Yes, absolutely. So. Okay, let's talk about this in a couple of different scenarios, okay? So knowing that Brian has some experience with some of our other series of consoles, specifically some Avantis and possibly some DLive applications, SQ, I'm going to kind of dive into some stuff quickly here, and we haven't talked about all this yet, but the one thing that I haven't covered is the S-Link connector on the back of an SQ. You can very easily, with a single Cat5, connect to another SQ mixer, right? So you have bidirectionality of all of these channels going back and forth, right? So you actually have access to be able to see more channels on the network than you could actually mix. Like our Dante card this is only a 48 mixable channel mixer, but we've got 64 inputs and outputs with Dante. Over a GigaAce protocol from, let's say, an Avantis console, because I know Brian's working with one, he's got 64 channels there, but that network can see 128 channels on a GigaAce. SQ's connectivity will show 128 channels. Now, you can only pick and choose 64, but you can send bidirectionally over those S-Link connections, right? So the easiest way to talk about this is to be specific to SQ functionality first, okay? So if what I want to do is I want to tie some remote boxes into an SQ. Let's say I have two DX 168s, and I pop those in series, one into the other box. Those are all 2496. I take the output from the first one, I plug into the S-Link on the back of the SQ. That gives me access to those 32 channels into my SQ. Now, if I popped an SQ card into the back of the desk, I could take the output from that SQ card and I could go to a second SQ. Let's say I've got an SQ6 and I've got an SQ7 as my second desk. And I have full access to what the first desk is seeing, but the first desk is going to have preamp gain control. I can get a line level control into the second SQ. But don't panic. This is what I usually talk about in most training scenarios for any level of mixer, whether it's SQ up to D-Live, is the world where people go, everybody's got to have control of all of the preamps. That is an audio disaster waiting to happen. Not quite time for a joke yet, but I kind of thought maybe it would be. But we'll wait. We'll give you just a minute or two. It is. I really recommend that in your applications, figure out who your A1 is. They determine who has control of the preamps. Now, that being said, the cool thing with all of the Allen and Heath series products, when you connect digitally, you still have plus or minus 24 dB of gain at either end of the desk. So like my first one, I'll set the preamps, but I still have digital trim on the SQ7 if that's my second desk. So Shawn and I have a difference of opinion on how loud the kick drum should be in the gain structure. And I'm like, no, man, it's not working for my compressor setup. I can take that gain input down on the second desk. So it's not a true discrete split. You could use that if you wanted to. You could use a passive split, but that gives you that capability. Now, if we jump rails a little bit, we talked about connecting a couple of desks. That works the same way with an Avantis and an SQ as well, right? You'd probably have the Avantis as your primary input desk, and then if you want to use the SQ as your broadcast desk or your monitor desk, you can do the split there. If you want to change it, there's no reason not to do. You know, they're going to sound beautiful. They're both 2496. And you're probably using the same remote box with either desk anyway. So you have the sound of whatever 2496 preamps you've purchased. Or if you had legacy stuff and it's only 2448, you still have all of that quality. The part that I'd like to talk about a little bit differently is some scenarios, if you want to have lots of connectivity, maybe you're using a Dante network, right? So you might use some DT boxes to get things in. Or you might use the remote boxes into your Avantis and then take a Dante split and put it out to something else. So either one of those, right? So you still have that connectivity level and you still have that digital gain control. If it's an all Dante system with all Dante preamps in our DT boxes, you can assign control to whichever desk that you want, and then you've got the Dante preamp control. I strongly recommend, once again, figure out who's in charge so you don't have multiple people accessing the preamp control if that's what you want. I think that's typically a recipe for disaster, but you guys can talk amongst yourselves, and by all means, I'm sure there's certain scenarios where you could prove me wrong. Anything you want to add to that there, Redbeard?
Nope, you answered it 100%.
Okay, make sure I didn't miss anything. So that's good. Now, okay, so that was good. Brian, give us another one or give us a A-OK if you're cool with that one, and that's awesome. Thanks for that. So we can split things out to all kinds of different desks. And then, while I didn't say this, let's make sure that I cover it. Hey, I want to do a split, and I want to actually put that out or take this in from a competitor's console. Now, I told you, I haven't actually covered all of these yet. I've got a couple more slides just to bang through real quick. Let's do this one. Couple more I/O boxes. We didn't talk about the granddaddy, which is the GX4816. That's a 48 input with 16 outs that's relatively new for us. It's been out about 6 months. And that one also has additional DX expanders in it, so you can add even more remote boxes for preamps if you want. And that one's all 2496. We also have a dedicated DX012. So I know the TC Furlong team does tons and tons of RF rentals, right? They're known for that locally and nationally. So if you ended up in a scenario where you needed to have a dozen or 6 stereo ears rigs that you wanted to have nice and tidy in a box, you could use a DX012 as a dedicated output box from our network connectivity, right? So that's just a little food for thought.
Brian did have a kind of a follow-up question.
Okay.
Would you be able to use a DX hub instead of using a second S-Link card to get to the other desk? And I actually don't know on that one. That's
I actually do.
Okay.
I believe that I do. And Brian, Shawn and I will verify this because I know Shawn's working on some other stuff for you. For connectivity protocol, the DX hub works with DX only, and you're going to want the GigaA stuff for some control and additional information. It would be limited, so you could not use the DX hub to tie the 2 desks together.
Perfect.
Okay, good. And then let's see. Jumping into the next slide here. This is what I was hoping to get to for you guys. I told you about the Dante card. We have a Waves card. If you are a big fan of Waves plugins, by all means, more power to you. If you like hauling around that server, go for it. I tease you a little bit, but we make varsity level plugins. Before you actually purchase or install the Wave stuff, take a listen to what's there. However, if you need pitch correction, we don't make a pitch correction plugin. If you want that, then by all means, that's why we say we play well with others, let Waves do their thing, and they do that really well. I talked about having that S-Link card, and I don't have a slide of it yet, but we just announced on Monday that we now have a Madi Card available for the SQ series as well. And that will be a 64 by 64 Madi card. So if you've got broadcast applications or you want to link to another desk that has Madi connectivity, that's available for you. So all of those connectivity points give you more options. All right, so that's doing pretty well with most of that, I think. So that, circling back to what I was going to say, you can go ahead and give me their thank you. I told you how you can connect all of our stuff. Now let's talk about how you can connect all of our stuff to everybody else's stuff. You've seen all the cards. We can do Dante to anything that you can get Dante into or out of, right? In lots of channels, more than the SQ even carries. We have Madi for the same thing. We have our own proprietary technology, but that's for us, right? If you don't know, Waves SoundGrid works phenomenally well. So if you want to do, there's some limitations on using a virtual sound card with Dante as an example. If you want to record right from the desk over a Ethernet connection, you could do that out of a Dante card into a computer. If you don't want to do that with Dante, you could use a Waves card. You don't even have to run a Waves server. You can just use the SoundGrid connectivity for recording and some capability, and they have a driver that works along with that that'll work with any DAW that you pop in. So that's elegant and sounds great and gives you up to 128 channels of connectivity bidirectionally. Now, once again, we can only do 64 in the SQ, but there's more there if you decided. So if you've got a brand that's not ours, but it's got a Dante connection on it, then just figure out how it's going to work best, and we can take that in or out, and you can figure out what will be your best functionality. Or if you're retrofitting something that you already own, you go, hey, I need to have a monitor desk, or I need a broadcast desk, or I need to have connectivity for 2 rooms. I actually prefer the sound of the SQ. It's $24.96, but I can put that other desk in the other second roll, and we can connect via Dante or via SoundGrid or via Madi or whatever it is. So, like I say, play well with others. Cool. All right, so that's kind of a lot on the connectivity. I haven't shown you the back page of the mixer yet, and I don't have a camera there, so I'd like to do that really quickly. Just to give you what the layout is, whatever the size is, local inputs, all XLR. There are a couple of stereo tip ring sleeve. They can be balanced or unbalanced 1/4 inch inputs that you can assign into some stereo channels if you wish. There's 2 of those. There's AES input and output on it. There's the USB interface that we talked about. There's the card slot. On the SQ5, there are 12 XLR outputs. There are 14 outputs on the SQ6, and it goes up to 24 input preamps. And then, as we said on the SQ7, there's 32 input pre's. Oh, I'm counting the input pre's, and I'm forgetting to tell you +1, right? There's 32 inputs plus a talkback mic. You don't have to give up one of your working inputs to be able to have a talkback so you can talk to these knuckleheads who won't stop making noise on stage. There's 12, 14, or 16 outputs on each of the scalables. That's the out. So that's just kind of the run on that. And then let's see, we talked about S-Link. There is also a network port on the desk. This is where you can connect I've just popped a router in as an example so that you can really easily use wireless control, because we do have apps for that. Rockin', thanks, Shawn.
Before we dive into the kind of the overview on the desk, Brian did bring up, he's like just curious more on if you could dive into a little bit more of the multi-track recording capabilities of the desk.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so depending on how you want to do that, it's funny. Let's bring you guys don't care if you're looking at me or a slide, do you? Let's bring up the next slide, Shawn, if we've got it. Because on the desk, on the SQ, we have what we call our SQ drive, right? The SQ drive is the thumb drive that's mounted to the face of it that will allow you to do multi-track recording to a thumb drive. Okay, so let's talk about this. We're using commodity media. Okay, so if your entire gig depends forever on what was recorded, I really strongly recommend a B plan. This works, it works really well, but the media is not dependable. So we've made a couple of improvements in the SQ. It originally was designed to record only at 2496. We've, with the last firmware update, allowed you to choose either 2448 or 2496. The bandwidth and the media itself in a thumb drive works better typically with 2448, and the file sizes are much more manageable, and that's a great way to do it. But if my gig depended on it, I'd use the USB-B port on the back, and I would use some type of computer to do something, and I would probably figure out a way to do that redundantly as well.
How many channels can you get on the USB-B port?
On the USB-B port, BB port is 32 ins and 32 outputs simultaneously. So that's 32 max. Now, if you wanted to go more than 32 channels, hey, I've got to have 64 stems. That's, excuse me, I've got to have 48 stems because that's what I'm mixing. You could get more outputs if you wanted to do inputs and output mixes. You could record 64 outputs if you use SoundGrid as a transport mechanism, and you can use that into any typical DAW or whatever you would use for recording software. If you want to use Dante works fabulously, and for, what is it now, $30 about. You can buy what they call a DVS license, which is Dante Virtual Sound Card. You can put it on any Mac or any PC, and it allows that computer to record with an Ethernet input the stream that you put over via Dante. The limitation is that there's a maximum of 64 channels licensed on a Dante stream. If you have the card set at 2448, you can do that. Our desk operates at 2496. If you want to have the beauty of that sound, the max limit is 32 tracks. So 32 tracks is really, frankly, that's a lot of tracks, and if you're doing live stuff, you could probably exceed that, but you might be using a little larger console at that point. I recommend a more robust recording mechanism. So that would be a way to look at a Waves card as the example for an easy way to do that. Anything
Perfect.
You want to add to that, Redbeard?
Nope, that answers everything. That's
okay,
perfect.
Cool. All right, good.
Let's dive into an overview. Or
yeah, let's do
layout
something on the console, right? So if we go back here and I'm playing around with this, and I've got, you want to give me an overhead? Thank you, sir. Thanks to Shawn for all of this, because he's made this super easy for me. SQ6 is a pretty little mixer, right? We've got all the faders in the universe. We've got nice bright lights. We've got scribble strips. I like to talk about the humanistic, so how the mixer works. It's easy to find your way around on it. It's intuitive, and it makes really easy sense and simple for both veteran sound folk and volunteers and people that may not know a lot about this, right? So mute buttons are all functional here. Anything that you need is there. We've got selectivity for each channel or an output section, depending on what we're working with. We call our solo or our Q button a PAFL button, as you can see here. Those are, depending on the application, set to be either pre or after fade listen. If you want a pre-fade listen, you can set it as such. You could have after fade listen, but it also gives you different things at different bus structures. If you want to listen to the preamp on the kick drum, that's great, but sometimes on the mix, you actually want to use the after fade sound, right? So it adds everything else into it. So we've got 6 layers to work with on the desk. So these are just laid out arbitrarily, but these are my main working layer that I designed as it is. Normally it would be channels 1 through 24 here, and then I get some extra channels, which should be up to 32. Here's some additional channels that have been set up already as stereo channels in the return setup. Those are just arbitrarily what I put into this. I've got some effects returns laid out here. They happen to be the same color. If I wanted to make those blue, I could make them blue. In these sections, I actually have the desk set up. As I mentioned, we've got all of our mix controls. I have aux sends on this one. I have a few groups set up on this one, and then I have some effects sends that are colored and coded in that way. And then, as we mentioned earlier, this is just another version of the main left-right output. If I have left-right selected over here, this becomes my main left-right. Now, if I decided that I'm going to jump into mix 1, that is no longer my left-right mix. It is actually my monitor mix 1. That's my monitor mix. Now, I still have a left-right main, and I could assign that any place that I'd like as well. As you'll see, I've even assigned the left-right main up here to a rotary, so I could have it no matter what layer I'm working on or where I am in the desk. If I wanted, I could have access here, or I could have it here, or I can have it wherever I put that on the last layer. You can lay that out on any layer that you want, any place you'd like it. In addition to that, I've also got the 8 DCAs that are that's the maximum number of DCAs that you can use in the SQ series. It comes with 8, and that's a ton. Frankly, I'm only using 4, I think, in this setup. And then I've got 3 matrices, and those could be assigned as mono or stereo. On the last layer, I have nothing. So that's pretty easy to see. We've just got it laid out as blank, but I think this is kind of a fun introduction to the desk. So I'm selecting the screen here where I've got nothing selected. The only thing that I'm seeing here is my left-right output. But if I jump into, if I go over here to, I'm going to show you guys something up a little closer here. As the overview, I'm going to go into Setup. And then on this menu, I've got functionality here.
Oop, hit your button one more time. I think you hit it twice.
Did I? Thank you, Shawn.
There you go.
All right. So I've got menus here, and whether you guys can read them or not, don't worry. I'll just tell you. We've got audio surface, mixer configuration, ganging network, and user setups. And then I've got menus across the top from left to right as well. I'm going into first mixer configuration, and this would tell me, hey, how many are any of my input stereos? Now I'm using some tracks that I'm playing back from a computer that I've got as Dante source, right? So I knew when I did those that a bunch of keyboard inputs and the overheads for the drums are all stereo. So I paired those channels up. If you want to pair channels up, you can literally make them mono or stereo with the touch of a button, and then you can just hit apply, right? So if I decided that I wanted to make that, I can hit apply, and then it's applied as a stereo send. I could take it back, and now it is mono again. I'm going to go to Surface, and in the first menu I have here is Strip Assign. Now I've got this on my top layer, and I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm going to go to my blank layer. And for fun, I like to do this because it makes Shawn twitch. I've got the opportunity here to grab anything that I've got laid out. And the first thing that I typically do is my DCAs. Because I'm left-handed, I immediately set up on the left-hand side of the board. So I go all the way over to number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'll put my effects in there. So I've got that laid out. And then I decided that somebody wrote, I think it's somewhere in Genesis, that kick drum is assigned to 1. Well, I don't really believe in that either because I'm the bass player, and I decided that, somewhere along the line, I've got to find the bass in here. I'm going to make bass the first thing after there, and then I'm going to add drums. So if I want to, I can lay that stuff out however I want. I can skip things. I can add other things. If I wanted to put my vocals in here, you can lay the desk out in a way that you see fit. So as you can see, I've got, this kind of cool setup where I've got mine now set up on the left-hand side. I'm the only guy in the whole world that really likes that, but it's easy and fun. If we go back to something that looks a little more conventional, if you want to do, you can move these over your DCAs to the right. If you like your DCAs in the center, you put them wherever you want. And that works for individual inputs. We can do anything that's in the overview here. So I've got inputs, effects, that sends and returns. You can put them anywhere you want. All of your mixes, so you have your auxes, your matrices, and your left-right could be set up any way on any layer that you want, and you can have them in multiple layers if you wish to do that as well. So that programmability, I think, is something that's really key and unique for Alan and Heath in allowing you to set up exactly what you want, where you want it, and pair everything up in a way that works great. So if we're planning the show and we go into setup, like I said, and we go into mixer configuration, we can pair these things. What if we're in the middle of the show, like Shawn and I are half the time, and somebody comes up and I put Shawn to work a lot. I'm like, hey, dude, we're going to have a guest accordion player. And he's like, all right, what inputs should I use for the Jackasophone? We are in Wisconsin, by the way, so it's occasionally polka gigs. But if we have to throw a mic up, no, you can't just have one mic on an accordion. It has to be stereo. So Shawn has inputs. He's got input 19 and input 33 available. Well, we can't really pair those adjacent in stereo, so instead we go into ganging. Am I on the right screen?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So what I can do is I can choose, I have 8 gang groups, and let's talk about what those are. And that's 8 ways that I can pair some things up, and it's a drag and drop configuration. I'm just going to grab number 8 for the grins on here. And what did I make up? I said it was input, 19 is chosen, I think. So I'm going to take input 23, and I'm going to take input 37, just to say that they're not adjacent and odd numbers both. And we can make those now a stereo pair, and we can plug in, all we have to do is hit apply. Now, what's most important about that is as we take those 2 channels and we're going to make a stereo pair out of them, what do we want to do with those? Okay, so if I let's keep this one up because I can talk about these individually. Trim, filter, gate, parametric, compressor, delay, fader, mute, pan, routing, and the direct outputs can all be grouped together or left separately. So when we talk about miking and accordion, I make the joke just for the fun of it, but the idea is that we can put, you probably will have the gain be the same, you'll probably have everything be pretty similar, right? Now, if you want to do this with a set of 4 or 8 or 12 choir microphones, you can do a lot of cool stuff. You could have the faders gang together, but leave the trims separately so that you can adjust it for each section of the choir that you're actually mixing to, okay? The other part that you can do is, and I've done this a couple of times, if you get an hour and you get to do a sound check with the choir, then you're doing great. But if you don't, and you can only get up and running, you've got to try to EQ 8 mics, and you've got to try to get rid of feedback, and you don't really have the time to figure out if the gains are all working, gang them all together and just make everything the same. Then you've got an easy solution to be able to control 6 mics or 4 mics or 8 mics. So you'll come up with some unique applications, but this is cool, and it's a free feature that, I don't know what it was, about a year in, we rolled this out in a firmware update, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have a couple questions that kind of came in, touching back to some of the previous connectivity questions.
Great.
So,
great. Let's talk about it.
First off, from Douglas.
All right.
In a recording use case, with no plug-in processing externally, does SoundGrid offer any advantage over Dante? And I'll jump on that one.
Please.
All right, I'm going to jump at the camera now.
All right. Redbeard, everybody.
So the big advantage, Pat touched on this. Dante being with virtual sound card, you are limited to 32 channels of recording at 96K per NIC. So if you wanted to record all 48 channels or more, you would have multiple NIC cards, multiple instances of DVS, which make it very cumbersome. So that's one advantage that SoundGrid actually has, is that our card is 64 channels. So I could be sending all 48 channels out to a recording machine at 96K.
Right.
So that's probably one of the biggest advantage, from a transport control and latency and things like that. They're pretty similar on speed. So that one, I will, that's my input on that.
All right,
one.
that's awesome. I have 2 things just to add as icing on the cake.
Definitely.
And thank you, because that was absolutely dead accurate. And Shawn's done tons and tons of this stuff. The other advantage is that this is personal, like in my opinion, right? I'm saying in my opinion. There are lots of great things about Dante. We can argue a lot about clocks.
Yep.
The one thing that I know can happen with any network device is it could, arbitrarily somehow end up with its IP address somehow reassigned.
Yes.
That's a lot less likely to happen when you've got a point-to-point connection with SoundGrid.
Yes.
So that's a little bit more robust. And I think that Waves has done a great job with that protocol of giving you something that's incredibly accurate and really robust at 2496. Now, understand that because it's streaming over network audio, it is valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the sub-millisecond exact timing that we have for our input for the live audio. We're dealing with a different animal, but Waves does that really well, and I vote for them when it comes to a card application. and it gives you a much higher channel count, right? So that's as Shawn had said.
I'm going to expand on this.
All right, this is good.
So one of the disadvantages of SoundGrid is that you only have 2 streams per channel. So for recording, if you could be going to a recording desk and you may be going to a server, but you're a little limited on that application, where Dante, you can do multicast streams and have backup computers and digital
redundancy,
splits and
right?
redundancy. So
Yeah,
it is very personal on how you want to do it. I vacillate back and forth. I use them all. So
I would say this, Douglas, I know that you are highly technical. If you develop a preference and you find a reason that you like one versus the other, please share it with us. As a resource, I just want to remind everybody too, when Shawn and I aren't here to banter senseless things back and forth that we make up, or we didn't really make it up, but just to talk forever, in answer to your questions, the TC Furlong team these guys are pro to go. They are just some of the best and most knowledgeable people in the industry. They're known for their expertise, and they're great guys to talk about your applications with. So beyond the Digital Console Expo, please consider them your resource, both regionally and nationally, because they're a smart bunch of guys.
And then Sam came in. Sam was on some of our other sessions the other days too. He got a little late, so he might have missed a few things, but he did have some questions. First off, when you are using more than one console with the DT boxes, how do you choose who has preamp control? In my specific case, I may be connecting with an SQ and a D Live. And to also follow that up, his second part of his question, can you plug and go with a DT box and a card installed, or will it need to be routed in Dante controller? Example, if we have multiple stage boxes, would I be able to grab any DT box and plug it into my console in our inventory?
That's an awful lot. It's not specific to SQ, but it doesn't mean we're not going to answer it for you. As we would say before, let's just do the multiple DT boxes.
Yep.
And multiple desks scenario. So if we have
multiple desks.
Yep. If we have a couple.
Let's say we have 2 SQs on there, and we have one DT 168 on stage. How do we get? Who gets preamp control?
I give it to Shawn. I just automatically give preamp control to Shawn because I'm usually on stage drinking beer and playing bass. Yes. How would you handle it?
Actually, I
come on up.
Well,
here.
I guess it's more from an aspect of the routing, which I actually don't know this one. So you might be able to teach me on this one. Part to answer your question, yes, you do have to make the patches in Dante controller. So it makes the link of the preamp box, the DT box that's on the network, and the console. Once you make that link and that patch, you then have preamp control. But what I don't know,
you already know this,
is who gets the preamp control. Is it the first desk that's patched gets preamp control if you're splitting the DT box? So.
Yes, yeah, that's basically what's going to happen for you. But why don't we do a follow-up for you? It was Sam?
Yes.
Yeah, Sam. Why don't we do a follow-up for you, and we'll give you some more details about that, and we can do like sort of the deep wormhole dive on all of that. Rather than do it right here and right now. Because there are a couple of things that I want to make certain that we give you 110% clarity on. And while I'm saying, and I'm just like, yes, I know it works that way. I haven't connected multiples myself, so I don't know exactly what it looks like yet, and I want to make certain. I think I know the answer, but let's confirm, and we'll get back with you on that.
And Sam, if you want to hang on at the end of the session, and we can open up your mic and we can talk a little bit more and find out some more details for you.
Cool.
Brian did have a question coming in. With ganging, is there a way for relative changes between associated members? In the Yamaha world, holding the select button and adjusting one member plus or minus when released, they will keep the associated difference. So he's asking about...
That's in the TA series or the TF series. They'll do that.
That I don't know. But basically adjusting one...
in the TF. I was making fun of it, really. but I get his point. So in ours, as I've worked with it, there isn't anything that I can vary something that I've got paired. So as as the example, if we pair the gain, I have to go, it's going to look at it as though they're paired and working from one control on the SQ series. There isn't a button I can hit to do that unless I choose to just disable the trim on that, and then I have the two gains that I could work with. There isn't a way to balance that or change it with a moderation or a touch of a button. But the way that I've worked with that, when I went, yeah, I thought I wanted the compressors tied together and it's throwing the stereo image off, or excuse me, I didn't think I needed it and it's throwing the stereo image off, maybe I'll go back and tie them together. You can figure it out one way or the other, and it's really easy because you just dive into one level, you go, okay, there's my pair, and I can disassociate just the one feature, but I don't have that same feature that you would on brand Y.
Perfect.
All right. So you guys, thanks for the questions. Keep them all coming if you want to. Talked a little bit about the ganging. We talked about applications. That's kind of a fun thing. I don't know how often you guys are using these either for your personal rigs or if you're in a facility where you've got other people that are going to be your audio techs, or if you're doing installation or if you're working with a church or things of that nature. I do a lot of training in House of Worship, and I volunteer and do some other stuff. We have 10 levels of user assignability. Am I on the right?
Yep.
Okay.
Just want to give you, like, we're kind of closing up. We got about maybe 10
okay,
more
great.
minutes of the main session. We're going to end the recording, and then we'll have a couple people stay on like we did yesterday.
Okay, great.
So
Awesome.
just to give you that.
All right, so what I wanted to talk about is we have user level permissions that you can get to on this, and you can actually go through and have up to 10 different levels starting with admin, and you can lock out some key features if you want to give it, you can make it so. This is just insulting, but people use the term all the time. If you just want to have a fader monkey come in, but I like to think of human beings as always more capable. So you have a novice user and you just want to start them with the faders. You don't want them to have EQs. Or let's say Shawn has me come in, I'm going to fill in, we're doing a theater gig together, and he wants to give me all the control of everything, but he's actually going to protect that front of house processing. He doesn't want me to re-EQ the room because he's already got it locked in. It's not just me, it's also a B-level tech, and you could lock out that one function. You could have it be as admin, and then you could have it as, tech 1, and then we can have it as, novice or whatever you want to label those at. The other thing that's kind of cool about it is if you have that login, it can require a password. And if somebody comes in with that password, you could have that actually recall a default scene. That can be really handy on installations if you've got a club application or if you've got a house of worship thing or you're doing some stuff where you want to give somebody something that gives it a refresh and resets it if they get themselves into trouble, or it just gives you something that you could start every night from that you can use as your base layout. So that's cool. Talk a little bit about, let's see, we've just got a few minutes to go here. We didn't hit lots of this, but the stuff that's here, I've got a preamp. I've got a preamp model that we can load in there for tube preamps. I've got a high pass filter. I have a fully functional gate that's in every I/O, right? I've got 4 bands of parametric EQ. Those can be tweaked and made sweet in some new ways. I've got a fully functional compressor on every one. And if you want to, there's plugins that you can expand up. Okay, so you can purchase aftermarket plugins from Allen and Heath that are not expensive, that do some great varsity level models, and you can run those in every input, and you can run those in every output. Output sections have an insert. It has a 28-band graphic for you. There is a 4-band parametric on there. There's a dynamics control as well, and it can be RMS or peak, so you can set it up for compression or limiting as you see fit. And there's also a parallel path on there. You've got delays on inputs and outputs if you wish. And then what's kind of cool about this is something that we added with the last firmware update is we actually built in an RTA on every output. And most importantly, it's not just on the output sections, but we had lots of people who didn't understand how to mix audio. And they'd come in and say, hey, will you do me a favor? Can you make it so that I can tell by color what I'm supposed to do? I'm like, no, because we're not lighting guys. What's the joke, Shawn?
Why did God say, let there be light?
Why?
Because audio was already working.
All right. But what we do instead is we put a 60-band accurate RTA built into it, right? So if I want to see that, we just kick it in, and we've got controls for it, including low frequency damping that you can play with a little bit to actually move it so it's a usable gain, so it marries up with where your EQ curve is, and then also what's happening at the speed of how things are peaking and what you're seeing. And that is built into every input or output, and it can follow a selected channel or the output, or it can just be fixed to one, whatever you prefer to have. So always available and visible if you wish to see it. If it's something that drives you crazy, you can just turn it off and you don't need to use it. That was kind of a cool thing that we rolled out. I talked a little bit about the ergonomics. You've got knobs for everything that you need. You've got programmable soft buttons. Over here, I used a bunch of the rotaries. Let me jump over to the overhead here. I've got rotary controllers that I programmed here, and as I mentioned before, I could have my left-right. This can also be my left-right if I wish, so I could have it no matter where I want. I use these as this is my aux 1 send for my lead vocalist, because they're forever asking, can I have a little more or a little less? I don't have to go into that layer or hit send on the mix. I can just do it right here. I've got a gain, this is gain for the fader for the lead vocalist themselves that I know I've always got to keep a hand on. And then I also did something the same thing with the effects return just for a mute for all of the effects. I can have it there, or I can have it on my DCA, which I realize now in this scene I didn't even lay out. I just popped it up there. So a lot of things available there. Built-in effects, we've got up to 8 effects engines in addition to all the channel processing, right? And you can run, right now it's set up with 4 default auxes. If you want to, you can borrow from the sends that we have, and those can be either effect sends, aux sends, or groups. All right, so how are we doing? Any questions?
Nope, nothing right now. Like I said, we're going to probably wrap it up here. Got about 2 more minutes, and we're going to wrap it up.
Anything that I might have overlooked that you recommend I should touch on?
Effects. How many effects are in the unit?
Okay, yeah. So as I said, we've got 8 up to 8 engines that you can assign. To get to the back of those, it's great, and you can decide where those are routed. So it's either through a mix or a return, or if I wish, I can hit this and I could assign that into an aux or drop it into an insert for a specific channel. So if I wanted to add a 80s drum reverb, I can drop in a gated reverb on a snare or a second snare input if I wanted to, whatever that would be. Output effects and some of the things that we have, as I mentioned before, you've got full, let me get to the output. One more. We've got EQ and we've got compression. Now I also have a library available. I don't think I have them loaded here. Is this desk loaded with the plugs? Okay.
Not.
So if I want to, I could purchase, let's say if I wanted an 1176 peak limiter, you could pop that in and you can buy that plug-in and you can load that both on the input section of any and all channels. If you decided that every channel should be 1176, then you could do that. Those are what we call our deep plugins, and they'll run everywhere. So we don't talk about 200 effect slots. Some of the manufacturers went a little crazy with that. Those aren't effect slots. Those are just processing. We have default, and if you want to, you can add the deep plugging, and they'll run everywhere as well. So
I do like to mention too, delay. That's a nice thing that we've got throughout the line of a delay on every input channel and every output channel. So now in these wonderful days of doing live streams and trying to align audio with video, you have that capability. So
yeah, absolutely. So those are built in, even in the SQ series that's available. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this SQ deep dive. I hope that it was helpful and that we've answered questions for you. And if it's piqued your interest and you're in the Chicago area and you want to get access to an SQ, contact the guys at TC Furlong. Tell them, hey, I want to rent one of those things, or I just want to stop by the shop and I want to play with it. Can I do that by appointment? Work that out in a way that's courteous and safe in these days. Shawn and I are always available. You can get support at AmericanMusicAndSound.com, all spelled out. You can call the TC team, and we'll still answer the telephone as well. So thanks, everybody.
All right. And with that, we have reached the end of the Allen and Heath SQ webinar, and we've reached the end of the Digital Console Expo 2020. So Pat, Shawn, thank you once again for joining us, not only tonight, but for your work throughout the week, all the preparation I know you guys put in before this week. Thank you to the rest of the TC Furlong team who has been involved in all of the planning and execution of this event. Really proud to be a part of this great team. And of course, thank you to all of us who have joined us throughout all of these events this week. So I just want to remind you that we have recorded all of the main session presentations. They're available on our YouTube channel right now. We're recording all these deep dive sessions as well. They'll be available on YouTube over the next couple of days as we get those out. Please follow us on our social media channels. We're on all the usual suspects. Type in TC Furlong Inc. on all those platforms. You'll be able to find us. Check out our website at tcfurlong.com. We've got a blog with some great educational content, event highlights, all sorts of fun stuff. And please keep in mind, this is not the only event we do each year. We're trying to do events just about every month these days. So the next event we have coming up is in January, January 21st. We have a webinar with Studio Technologies. So stay tuned for more details on that and a registration link. That will all be available very soon. With that, thank you very much, everybody, and have a great night.